everybody, this is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to Tea Time. Today we're going to be interviewing two people that I've known for many years now, Cathy Maday and Ivan Konermann. They're the principals of Wingspan Performance. So welcome, Ivan, and welcome,
Thank
Cathy.
you.
Tell us a little bit about how things are going for you right now as far as your business goes.
Yeah, they're going, I would call it a construction site.
Oh, tell us about that.
We've got, I mean, as far as our legacy services, intensive coaching with business leaders, we are building a lot in terms of our digital courses and our group coaching.
Mhm.
And so heading into some new territory after years of being asked to do so.
Yeah. And so is your thought then that there's going to be certain parts of your program that people can learn in advance, or is this something that would accompany a live training or a little bit of both?
Yeah, it could be both or either or. So for some folks who have a bigger organization that say, gosh, I really want to help team members and I want to do it in a way where it's cost effective for the organization and it also still blends and connects in with perhaps coaching that's more senior leaders are getting. That's a great way with the course to help spread some of that love and spread some of that support really across different parts of the organization.
Excellent. And so how involved is this development?
Oh, well, we're getting ready to launch our second cohort for the Wingspan Performance Academy. We got fantastic feedback from the first go round and already have a waiting list. So we're excited to take what we learned and head into this next launch with it.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. So who was it ideally designed for? How did you go about letting them know that this was something they could take advantage of? Give us a little shape of what the program is a little bit about. So, yeah.
Yeah. The big premise with the program is that we work with so many high performers who, as you know, T, which means they have consistently demonstrated lots of high performer behaviors, high performer mindset. Though as they continue to advance in their scope of impact, their scope of responsibility, and now that they're accomplishing more with and through more people, those same behaviors that are now in autopilot, they're now a habit, they start to get costly and they start to create some sticky problems that they're unaware of in terms of their interpersonal performance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, do you think this is more a program that is about expanding or remedying whatever's might be the problems up to this point?
So really, it's a bit of both because a lot of times when people, like Cathy said, and she says it really nicely, when people are high performers, they're used to solving problems and they solve problems by saying, what's going on? And like many folks say, oh, how do I turn this into a process? Because I'm going to solve this thing, whether we realize it or not. I'm going to solve this once. I want to solve it so I can do it the same way from now on. So I want to make a pattern. And then what happens is the underlying facts around and the information and the players and the situation change so that pattern doesn't fit. So what we do is we help people step back, recognize you have a pattern, and without judgment, saying, okay, yeah, I've got a pattern, and here's where that pattern fits, and then also recognize here's where that pattern isn't fitting, and then here's some other things to do instead. So the biggest part is to help leaders pull back and have more of that self-awareness with, ooh, where am I going into that autopilot? Where am I doing things that's a routine where I've solved this problem years ago and I'm not even realizing this isn't the same problem.
Yeah. Well, you're both ChangeWorks professionals, and so you've pretty much described something that in the world of tension management is a very, what do we say, powerful insight that most companies don't notice. And by that, what I mean is that people notice stress. So business leaders will notice stress. Stress is noisy. Stress calls attention to itself. But over the course of time, as puzzles are solved and problems are resolved and patterns are formed and processes are put into place, things slip further and further down in tension. And that means people are going from being truly in control to assuming they're in control, to maybe just having an illusion that they are in control. And so We believe that far more executives, far more management team members, far more employees, period, are probably suffering from that lower level of tension where things start to fall by the wayside and then careless mistakes get made, the misfit that Ivan was describing. But let's go back to the other group we talked about, people that might be brand new to it, who are more stressed out about their leadership role.
Mhm.
So are you also dealing with people who might be high performers in one aspect of business, but now they're in a different role that requires them to have these leadership skills or management skills that they may or may not have?
Oh,
Talk about that.
yeah, spot on. Because there's this combination where they're down in those lower levels of tension because of their technical experience.
Yeah.
And then as they gain more responsibility on the people, or what we call the behavioral side, that's where they go up in the stress, because they don't really understand when they approach it like a technical problem. They don't really understand what's going on in that people dynamic. And how they are sometimes the very things that there are situations where they're super stressed and frustrated, they don't understand how they're actually contributing to it.
Okay, all right. And so
And
how do you gently bring this to their awareness?
that, well, and so I'll go back to that phrase, they don't know how they're accidentally contributing to it. So at the heart of our Wingspan Performance Academy, and the core process within the Wingspan Performance system is the personal contribution process. And so the first step that we walk through, and this is part of what Ivan was talking about, is looking at the situation and looking at the human and behavioral contributions to that. What exactly is going on in this situation, and practicing doing that without judgment. And then we go in, we help them to understand that for really good reasons, their contributions to that are accidental or unintentional. Like you said, really good reasons. You're used to approaching something like this because you've mastered it in a different area or with a different team. Like Ivan was saying, in certain situations they've got it down, except this is a different players, different situation. And so we do help them exercise a great deal of compassion, that as they begin to identify or recognize what are some of their habits where they're contributing to this.
The other piece of this that's interesting is that a lot of times leaders who, to Cathy's point, are used to solving technical problems, they'll come in and they either will oversolve for technical and or they will fail to even just recognize that there is a behavioral pattern at all. And so we help them, because they'll say, well, Sally didn't submit the report, and they'll get overly focused on submitting the report. And we'll go, well, hang on. How many times has this happened? Like, how much does Sally really know how to submit the report, or what goes in it, or whatever the details are? How much does she really know that? Oh, no, she knows all that. This isn't a technical problem. This is a behavioral problem. So we help them get clear on where those dividing lines are in different situations, so that they can really get a better handle on and switch some of their mental gearing into, oh, it's not a technical thing. How does Sally do a report? It's this other thing. How does Sally keep herself on track?
Interesting. And it sounds like part of this might also be based on perhaps their personality or their temperament. You know, you're talking about technical types. A lot of technical types may approach everything in life purely through that technical lens. And so they might go into this situation in a business setting thinking like, well, nobody needs to tell me how to do this, how to do this. So why should I have to tell anybody else? Or why do they need to be told? You know,
Yes, I love that you're bringing that up, T, because technical types, or more like analyticals, are originally who I designed the process or the performance system for.
Okay, all right.
And it was so that they could, I mean, they're just, again, brilliant on the technical side, the analytical side of their responsibilities, their expertise, and yet they were unknowingly creating a ceiling for them in terms of opportunities, and because they weren't effectively in their interpersonal performance, they weren't as effective as they really could be. And so what we continue to hear from lots of business leaders is they love how practical and tangible the tools and frameworks within the Wingspan system are, because they can be much stronger in their leadership performance and their influence without feeling like they had to become somebody else.
Interesting. And so while this started with kind of the technical environment in mind, I imagine this has been applied to every kind of industry and every kind of person you can think of by this point.
Yeah.
So
Manufacturing, retail, real
yeah,
estate, technology, all over the place.
So these dynamics, even though they may not be coming from that technical personality, if you will, it still is all happening. People that are the doers don't necessarily understand how to talk to people that are there to support them, to guide them to, whatever needs to be followed through and to make it all happen. So I'm kind of wondering, if I'm the owner of a technical business, I would imagine I'm probably a technical type as well.
Good chance.
Ended up having, someone's got to call the shots. So, sooner or later. So how do they first recognize that they have an issue, or what do you bring to their attention to get them out of their technical space and see that what you're talking about makes solid sense for the business they're trying to operate?
Well, you said it perfectly earlier, T. You said anytime any one of us are up in our stress zone, it's loud, it's painful. So when things get painful enough, we're asking a lot of questions to help them identify exactly what's going on. And so it's not like we're trying to convince them or talk them into what the problem is. Things have gotten painful enough. They're overextending themselves. A lot of times, here's what we hear. I'm spending my time doing their job, meaning their team. I'm spending my day doing their job, and then at night I'm doing my job. And so they're missing out on things. They're exhausted. They're frustrated, and those are fantastic indicators.
In addition to it being a singular thing that comes to mind, one of the questions we'll ask a lot is, well, how long has this been going on? How often does this kind of thing happen?
Is this a pattern or is this a fluke?
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of times when they pull back and they go, oh my gosh, this happens every month, or oh wow, geez, now I think about it, this happens twice a week. So now they get to pull back from the individual details, or they begin to connect how this thing is really connected to this thing, even though they're on technically very different areas. And so a technical leader may say, well, that's on this and that's on that. And they begin to realize, oh my gosh, these are behaviors. And the same core behavior is showing up in multiple places. And so we can help them find that bigger pattern where they go, geez, it's time for us to do something.
Also, I can stop it throughout. So let's talk a little bit about early warning signs, because I'm certainly hoping there are people that are watching this video who may very well be ideal candidates for your services. So how would they know? You already mentioned there's some pain points, but could you specifically rattle off a few specific pain points that just make them go, enough already, I got to do something?
Here's the number one thing I'll say to leaders is, when you go home at night, what do you talk about with your spouse or with your friend or whoever it is, family member? Who's that person you talk about? What exactly is going on? Because that's probably something you have tension about, or it's something that's happened again and again and again, and you're going, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened another time. So a bunch of examples of that are, someone's like, I'm just like Cathy said before, I'm doing someone else's job, or I'm solving their problem.
Yeah, well, that's a big thing. And that's, again, it's one of those behaviors that has been a strength. I'm going to go solve the problem. Except now it's that habit, strong habit, autopilot. They continue to be the go-to person solving the problems rather than, and so they're taking responsibility that's not theirs. Though that frustration, just like you say within ChangeWorks, our tension has information. We will remind them, your frustration has information.
That's right.
And so what's happening when you're aggravated, annoyed, frustrated? You're not feeling those things for no reason. And so we actually ask questions to help them identify and get better at the early indicators, so they don't get you know,
Right,
straight
right.
up
So they can
into,
cut it off before it escalates any further.
yeah.
Also, one other thing that'll happen is sometimes people will say, well, gosh, Mike hasn't been doing this for so long. We're just going to let him go. And sometimes people already have jumped to the point where they're already thinking about exiting a team member. And I'll say, well, hang on, how have you approached this with Mike? What have you done to help him? Especially because they'll say, well, he's so good on these things and those things and just
Right.
this thing. Like, we're going to let him go. Like, well, how are you helping him get there? So a lot
Well,
of times,
right. Plus because it sounds like he may very well not be the problem. He may very well be a symptom of the problem, and we can get rid of the symptom, but the problem stays.
yeah,
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
So I think that's one thing that you're saying is that if you find yourself doing the work that you've
Yes.
hired other people to do,
Exactly.
you have a problem, because
yes,
not only is it taking you away from doing what you need to be doing, you are simultaneously robbing someone of a developmental experience that could
yep,
equip them to be the person you need going forward.
yeah,
For
So,
sure. Or not need going forward right now.
yeah, yeah.
right,
Needed yesterday.
right,
There's
exactly.
so many business leaders who are thinking in their mind, I want to empower my people. And we were like, first of all, just stop getting in the way. Like,
Mhm.
let's just
Right, you're
start
right.
there.
Yeah,
I love what we're talking about, but it feels like it's a step beyond this initial awareness or this pre-awareness that I have a problem. And so if we can give the listeners some things that they never even thought might have meant anything, but are clear early warning signs. I'll give you a
yeah,
couple that I've learned from other clients that I've worked with.
Yeah.
The owner of the company felt that every time a meeting was held and the meeting ended, everybody came to their office to have the meeting after the meeting.
yep,
So that to me is a very powerful early warning sign.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if your meetings aren't resolving issues, if your meetings are followed by people coming to your door, if your life is filled with knock, 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 can I talk for a minute? Then these are early warning signs as well to be looking for. Does that resonate
yeah.
with what your program is?
Absolutely. And on the meeting front, you could even go into, you have the same meetings again and again because people aren't prepared. You go to meetings and you go, what in the heck is this meeting for? Or team members show up and go, what is this? What is this about? I didn't even know what to do or how to prepare. I'm not sure how to contribute. Those are some indicators. And then stepping out of meetings and going past the doing other people's jobs, it's people aren't getting things done. I'm chasing people. I'm following up with people because things aren't getting done. We're getting off track. We're behind on projects.
Oh, wait. Oh, I got the perfect one. I'll just do it myself.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah, of course,
yeah,
of course. It will
yeah,
take me longer to fix this
yeah,
with others, and I'll just do it myself. Here's
yes,
your paycheck. It's like, what's
yeah,
that all about?
Yes.
What's that all about?
yeah. That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good
yeah,
one.
yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, when once we get someone to realize I do have a problem, then all the education can begin. And even I'm sure in your earliest discussions with someone, you're starting to help them be aware that not dealing with these problems creates greater problems. What is your role in this thing? How are you enabling the behaviors you do not want to actually continue? But
Yeah,
that to me is something that can't happen until after they've actually spoken to you.
Mm.
So I'm thinking about the things you've got right now. Let's just say this. For every client you have secured over the course of your career, there are probably another 1,000 out there who are
mm,
suffering greatly, but they aren't aware that what they're dealing with that is something you can help them with.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, if I'm trying to sell cold and flu medication, I don't talk about my cold and flu medication. I talk about the sniffles and the sneezing and the
coughs,
watery eyes
yeah,
and all that. So this early warning sign, I think, is a very important thing, because how many
Mm.
people listening to this call can actually say, I never have a problem with people coming into my office after a meeting is over and done with. I never take other people's work under my to-do list. So blah blah blah. So I'm looking for just maybe a couple more of these early one. Like how about staff turnover or challenge filling positions? Anything like
Yeah.
that?
Bad handoffs between teams. So again,
Okay.
projects fall behind, things aren't spec'd properly, where a team hands off something to another team and the team goes, wait a minute, that doesn't fit in what we want. I mean, somewhere in there was communication drops.
People aren't listening to me.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
We get people on meetings and they're on their darn phones, or they're phased out, or they show up to meeting, don't ask any questions, don't contribute anything, and then they keep coming to the meeting.
And then they complain about it afterwards. The water water coolers. So
yeah. The virtual water cooler, the meeting after the meeting for sure.
The meeting after the meeting after the meeting, which erodes all credibility of the meeting.
Yeah.
To begin with, right? Right.
Yeah. Also, team members come and say, "Man, I'm doing too much. I'm overloaded. Like I just got too much on the plate." And either sometimes they'll just leave beforehand. Hopefully, they'll at least give the manager a heads up, because what that means is something has gotten off whack in terms of prioritization, in terms of expectations. The manager has a role in that, whether they realize it or not.
And it sounds like it may very well be the case that they have plenty of time and resources to do the work, but because of these other issues you're describing, they're distracted from that work, or they're annoyed by whatever's going on, and that's what's really making it impossible for them to get the work done.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, decisions aren't being made, projects are delayed, deadlines are missed. Those are other
excellent. All right, so
warning signs.
Yeah, go right ahead, Ivan.
Also, one other piece is some of those warning signs aren't just internally organizations. Sometimes they're external. So customers stop buying. People stop wanting to work with your organization, or you have a hard time keeping suppliers or vendors. You continually are having problems transporting. Anything that's external, where it's a consistent, we keep having this kind of a problem, that's a great spot for people to go, wait a minute, like this isn't that hard to figure out. What's going on? So whenever leaders stop and go, this doesn't make any darn sense, there's a good chance there's a people issue in there in some way, shape, or form. And that's a spot for people to dig more. And that's where we can help them dig with a better set of tools.
Okay, great. So let's say I've been watching the video, maybe I've perused your website, and I have come to the realization that I got problems. So now I'm talking to you, the very first time I'm talking to you. Are there certain questions you want to throw at that business owner very early on to help them make that connection between what these early warning signs are revealing and what they need to be doing about it sooner rather than later? So any provocative questions, any aha kind of questions you would throw to these listeners?
Every time you're solving problems for your team, what is it costing you?
Okay. All right. All right.
The question I have is, what did you expect, and how did you communicate that to this other person before this thing happened?
All right. So that sounds like when this conversation begins, in your experience, people start to right at the beginning, revealing whatever their pain is. All right, people pay attention to where they find their tension. They're going to say, I hope you can help me. Let me tell you what's going on. And then they give you some insights, and then you go to whatever direction.
A lot of times when we start with folks, I'll say, look, you're a busy CEO or a busy president. You've got a lot on your plate. I'm sure there's something that you have identified that is important for us to talk about today. So let's just jump right into that. What is that thing? And that way they've got the space and the freedom just to say, oh gosh, my vice president of such and such is having problems and blah, blah, blah. And so then they oftentimes are waiting to have somebody they feel is willing to listen and qualified to help them tease this thing apart and understand it better.
Excellent. Excellent.
I would also ask the question, how long are you willing to tolerate this?
Yeah.
Right. When is enough enough? We say in change work that change happens when someone finally says enough. So whether it's something that's causing them trouble in their life, or whether they haven't really applied themselves and become as successful, sooner or later, someone has to reach a point where they just go, enough. Something has to change.
And a lot of times what we do is we help them recognize that when they feel that cost, that leader feels that I'm tired of doing this person's job, or I'm this, they only realize the cost from their perspective. And a lot of times we'll ask questions to say, well, how is this affecting that person's direct reports? How is this affecting that person's peers? What does this mean for other parts of the business? How does this do your customers?
Right.
And we help ask questions, and they begin to go, oh my gosh, there's a cost here, there's a cost here, there's a cost here, there's a cost here. And when they add those up, then a lot of times they come to exactly that realization that you just described of, oh man, it's time to do something about this.
No, because it's easier and cheaper to fix it now than it is later. I mean, little side story. We're thinking about, should we replace Windows, you know? And then we realize sooner or later, we're going to need to replace the Windows. We might as well do it now. It's not going to get cheaper.
Yeah, or easier.
Right. And so you apply that to a business setting. You can say to the business owner, whether one thing I know for certain is that regardless of what we do today, when I walk out that door, the problem remains. So how long are you going to wait before you do something about this? It's not going to get any easier. It's probably going to get more difficult. It's not going to get any less expensive. It's probably going to get more expensive. And you have to talk about the loss of opportunity that's happening in the meantime. So I mean, I'm sure, you know, right now we're talking more about how resolving this problem is going to give someone more ability to focus on what their actual job happens to be. It's going to reduce the stress that they might be taking home with them. It's going to be reducing. And I'd like to hear what some of the measurable, concrete, tangible costs are of this problem existing. So what kinds of things can you share with people that they need to be watching for on that line?
Well, an example from a customer I talked with last week. Now he's a customer because they signed a contract. I said to them, how much is this problem costing you each year? And they said $5 million in sales.
And suddenly you're a bargain.
So yeah.
We only cost $4 million.
Yes. We don't cost $4 million. And yes, so they really do have, a lot of them have very hardcore measurable numbers, and we encourage them as part of the personal contribution process to put a hard number on that. In addition to that, and today the biggest thing that people see is I've got turnover.
Right.
I'm running out, I'm hiring new staff, and that it costs money because now nobody's doing that job. So we have someone else filling in. There's an opportunity cost, and it costs us to find a new person and hire them and get them trained up. And so
fantastic, colorful reviews on Glassdoor, and then that's impacting how we can hire top talent into our business. And
so staff turnover is a really big one. That's a huge.
Here's another one that's smaller. Our meetings are more productive, and now we take 25 minutes instead of 60.
All right. So you run the math on how many people and how much you're paying those people. You're actually saving money in the moment, saving expenses in that very moment. Right. Right. No, go ahead.
I also had a leader who said, again, last week or a week and a half ago, he says, with this, I've realized I can cut 2 hours a day or 2 hours of meetings a week out of my life. So right then I said, you just realized a 5%.
That's right. Run the math on that. Right.
Just on that one, 5% productivity gain by not attending 2 hours of meetings where you feel like you don't have a purpose or contribution.
Exactly. You know, one of the things that we talk about is that all work falls into one of three categories. So there's income generating activities, there are income conserving activities, and there are income consuming activities. And one of the things I like to do with a client to say to them, when you've got all this disconnect happening within your organization, people aren't necessarily getting along or whatever, if this is happening among the people that you rely upon to generate revenue for your company, then the cost has to be, weighed accordingly. So because now what's happening is all those dollars that you were investing, thinking they were going to end up generating greater levels of revenue, have now become income consuming activities because it's just a bunch of, belly ache and whatever. And so don't let yourself become a bit of a, how do I say this politely? Oh, why bother? A social service agency that you pay people to come to.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're here to do business. We're here, this is a for-profit company.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Focus on that. So, yeah.
And this ties into something we talked about a second ago, which is a lot of times people will say, oh, well, this isn't a good time to do this because I've got this big project kicking off next month. And what we'll say to them is, well, hang on, like, how much sense does it make for you to go through this big project with the team with these kinds of problems? Like, now is actually the time to start to in fact, now's the best time. The best time would have been 6 months ago to start to use these tools so that it can begin to operate differently. So that, to your point, it's not income consuming, it's income generating, or it's income conserving. And they're bringing those stronger performance behaviors and mindsets and communication to the table.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm kind of curious. So again, let's be that person who's hearing give us this discussion. And now I'm feeling like I've got some real problems. And you've told me what I need. How long do you think it takes before I might start seeing some positive benefits, even though they may not be reflected in the bottom line? How early on in your training, your coaching, consulting, might someone say, that one little thing all by itself has actually made a difference? So how long? Are we talking about months, weeks, hours, maybe one conversation?
So I will routinely hear from CEOs that in one 3-hour workshop where they're learning the personal contribution process, that they have the clarity and they now know exactly what to go do. And on issues that they've been processing or dealing with for 6 months, 12 months, because they didn't know exactly what was going on.
Right. And so then, to Ivan's point, you're only asking them to carve out 3 hours. I know you've got this big project you're working on, but I promise you the 3 hours that you invest up front will save you 3 hours times many a factor as this real project unfolds. So is that basically the essential? Yep.
It is. And a lot of times they'll say they start seeing, again, talk to directors and VPs and presidents, and they'll say they start seeing changes in their teams the next day. Like they'll say they show up for a meeting and it's not just okay to listen to a meeting and people walk out with an empty thing. It's, hey, so what have you got? What's the due date on that?
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh my God, we've never asked for due dates before. This is fantastic. And it's
right. So after 3 hours, they've already got an enhanced skill set.
Absolutely.
That they can use to better do things. And let's say I wanted to take it from that, let's call that awareness, to maybe an early operational sort of level. I can actually implement some of this stuff. How long do you think it takes for someone to become proficient in applying the tools and techniques that you guys like to offer your clients?
For some of them, they can become proficient in a matter of weeks. For some of them.
Yeah, that's on the rarer side.
Sure, they're like with the digital course, as they continue to apply what they're learning, within weeks they can minor edits to their language, their questions, and they will make massive shifts.
And I think that's really important to talk about, because so often I've found prospective clients who believe that we can go in and do some sort of a quick, instant, complete fix. No. And the answer is that, no, we can come in and give you people some awareness, some understanding, some knowledge that will help them immediately. But this problem didn't appear overnight. It's not going to disappear overnight. Well, so there's exercises to do. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And the exercise word, it draws into mind the perfect analogy, which is if someone comes to me and says, I want to lose 100 pounds, and I say, okay, great. And I help them with things to do. And then they keep eating, cupcakes and whatever else, all this other junk food. And of course, they're not going to lose the weight. So if somebody really knuckles down and says, I want to make a point to do this, they can become really effective in a short amount of time. For a lot of leaders, it's on the scan of weeks to months, where some of these pieces start to become more practiced if they're doing their part to really on a day-to-day basis say, okay, I want to make sure I use this. And this is also where it's so important that when we meet with folks month after month, it's to help them, so when they have that interaction or they use the tools, that they can come back and go, okay, so I did this thing and I had this outcome and I was expecting that outcome. So what happened there? We can go, here's some tweaking and refining and some things for you to be aware of. And so we help them with that iterative process. Daily practice, because it's really that experience where they build that muscle, so they know how to use these tools day to day when it really can.
It sounds like that once they start to implement these, tools, techniques, insights, and do it for a reasonable period of time, that people reach a point where they feel like they can count on it. That it's a reliable, predictable, consistent sort of an environment. And to me, in my head, that equals a cultural change within the organization. So can you talk a little bit about the cultural change aspects of it?
Yes, the first thing that when we're working with teams and they are focused on culture, we help them to understand that your culture is that your aggregate behavioral performance every day. That's your culture. That's how it's being created. And so we help them to start shifting, instead of really focusing on culture, which is a big, ambiguous, nebulous thing. Start to focus on individual behavioral performance. That's our contribution. That's how we're creating the culture. And like you said, when you do put these insights and tools, the Wingspan tools, into practice in your daily performance, it is reliable. When you're far more intentional, then you can create those predictable outcomes, including the impact on your work relationships.
Right. And imagine if you're an employee, do you want to be working in an unpredictable, unstable, chaotic environment?
Well, and here's another word I would use in addition to predictable is it gives people confidence. Because if I go into a conversation with Cathy, for example, she's my teammate, and Cathy starts to give me some tough news about, hey, some of the things you've been doing have been off track, and I've got confidence because she is predictable in how she's going to support me with this, then it's much easier to have those tough conversations. And so often in organizations, what happens is people aren't confident in how a tough conversation is going to happen. And so they forget it. I don't want to approach that because I don't want to wreck my relationship. And so people don't feel confident in their ability to say, well, I want to have a good relationship. And it's important that we're honest about what's happening. And these tools allow for that confidence and that exchange to happen in a way where it's not one or the other. It's absolutely preserving and advancing both.
Stronger performance, which is your business results, and stronger relationships.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so it sounds like these tough conversations might actually end up being less tough from the get-go once people are treating one another in the ways that you're describing.
Yeah.
So I can make it less tough, and we can help you address tough conversations.
So, and so many leaders will say too, when they do, we'll challenge them. Okay, well, when are you going to go talk to Mike about this thing? And they'll say, oh gosh, I'm not sure. And so we'll stay with them and say, well, hang on, I'm not sure is it going to cut it. So when are you going to have this? Okay, I'm going to go talk to
phone. How about now?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go talk to Mike on Friday. And we say, great. So then we'll follow up with them and say, how'd the conversation go with Mike on Friday? And they'll say, man, the conversation went great. It wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. That it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. We've probably heard that 1,000 times because people build it up. And when they go in using these tools and they're intentional, it often goes far better than they expected.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, if I don't want to do something, I've always said that humans have an amazing ability to rationalize whatever it is that they want to rationalize. So if you ask me, why don't you want to go do whatever? I could just say to you, give me 60 seconds. I can come up with a whole list for you.
Yeah.
None of which may actually be, valid or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, All right, and so let's say now that oh, by the way, I was going to say that I think a lot of people do put too much focus on culture, like that's what we're trying to create. I've always said, no, no, no. Culture is how you see what you are creating. And
Yeah.
so it's a reflection of what's really going on. It's not a thing.
Yes.
So
Yeah, so going with what Cathy said, I'll say to a lot of leaders, you actually have two cultures in your organization. You have your aspirational culture. This is what we want to be. And then you have your real culture. How do we actually treat each other on an average day? Because that defines what you're doing. And the great part is people will say, oh, well, when you break it down like that, and that it helps them realize they have more options. And I say, yeah, and guess what? You get to define that, and your team members get to define that every single day. So it's not up to HR or the company president or whoever in the heck or the last 20 years to decide how we interact today. We get to decide that for ourselves right now because we're going to be more deliberate and aware.
That's right. Yeah. So I've always laughed when people say, well, we really don't have a culture. It's kind of like, yes, you do.
Oh.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do. And the fact that you think you don't, that's an indicator.
That's right. That's right. That's part of your culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
People aren't informing you of what's really going on in the organization.
Yeah. Or they're not paying attention to how things are happening.
Are you the big bad wolf, or are you just clueless as to what's really happening? You know, sometimes you have to like rough up your client just a little bit to get their attention.
Yes.
So, well, I mean, think about that. No one hires a consultant to tell them everything they're doing is correct. You know,
some people do.
Well, they might, but they're not going to get their money's worth. I mean, I'm happy. You know,
well, they're not going to get that from us.
I'm just saying, it's kind of like, look,
we're honest.
I'm here to help you identify what is standing in the way of you getting to where you want to go, and keep in mind that what's standing in the way might very well include you. So we have to really be that. So I wanted to get to this.
Yeah.
How do you walk that line between being open, candid, clear enough with the business owner or executives, the case may be, without them feeling as though you represent a threat to their position, their role, their safety?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Well, part of that is reminding them that because of their role within the business, so many people are looking to them. And so their impact and their influence on all the team members is much more heavily weighted than he or she even realizes. And so, we also remind them that you have been super successful up until this point with these high performer behaviors, except now the payoff is low and the cost is high because you've got more people to be doing the work. You've got, you're working with and through more people. And so in your daily team performance, that's something that you're all co-creating. And so there's a good bit of your influence that's accidental for very good reason. Or unintentional. And so we're going to start to take a look at that. And the more that you exercise that healthy control over your behavioral performance, meaning your contribution, it's like magic. When you change just your part of the equation, you change the whole equation.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought that up is because I'm sure you guys have experienced this a great deal. We get hired to do a training program. That's all great. But the people who really need to sit down and learn what we're trying to teach find some reason not to be there. And and I think that, you know, so some of they wonder, how do I look if I'm sitting as a student? And by helping them realize that them sitting as a student does more for helping everyone adopt what you're trying to put forth than anything else really would.
Well, and two thoughts with that. One is we do our best to help people pull the judgment piece out of it, because a lot of times people are especially senior leaders, they are go-getters. They have busted their butts. They have worked on weekends and nights and missed soccer games and all this stuff. And they think, oh my gosh, I've done so much. I can't be wrong now. And we help them say, gosh, it's not, you're never wrong. You're continually doing the best thing you can in any moment. All that's happened is you've taken what worked in this situation, taken it to a new situation where it stops working or stops working as well. And so we help to pull that judgment piece out of it. The other part of it is we also help them say, hey, what would you want people to tell you? Like, how honest would you want people to be about where you're on track and off track so that you can really help the organization? Oh gosh, yeah, I'm desperate for that. Okay, well, this is one of the ways you can find out. Like,
Right.
this
And how you
process is
can,
one of the ways to begin to crack that can open, so you'll really get that valuable information from your team members, even your direct reports.
they got to create that safe environment, the open environment to allow that to even happen.
Yeah. And I'll let them know too that our process in working, even if we were to come in and work with one like VP, is letting them know that our process is so powerful because we don't just work with the one person. So it requires some tag teaming. So I'll let the CEO know it's my having some sessions with you is a critical part of the process in order for us to meet our objectives. And I said, we're going to take a tag team approach because I don't get to work with you in your real world. And so it's going to, and it's important that we're staying in sync, that I'm hearing, what are you observing in terms of behavioral change? And in taking that team approach, that's what's going to get us accelerate, like get that early traction and then accelerate those results. And so I'll just ask them, how willing are you to perhaps change a bit on your part of the equation? I'll just ask them up front. And
right, because ultimately everyone's working, how to say this, these issues don't occur in a vacuum. It's not something isolated to a single individual or a single moment in time. Everyone has a role that they're playing in all this.
Yeah. Well, again, we get into those patterns of, I like to describe it as patterns of dancing. And so we're dancing back and forth like this. And when the one person changes their part and they do this, all of a sudden another person goes, whoa, stuff's different. And so now, and then again, when especially both sides are getting some of that help and coaching to be aware of what they really want to do and how to do that more cleanly, then they can both go, I recognize, and they can move so much faster and they can get there a lot more comfortably than they would be able to otherwise.
Yeah. And I love that you said everyone has a role, because that's why we named it the personal contribution process. Because in any and all interpersonal performance, it's something that we're co-creating, where every party is contributing. And we don't call it the personal blame process or the personal fault.
No,
it's just our contribution.
You try to let people know that there's whether you want to label something as a failure or not, that's optional. We think if you don't win, you learn. And so even if you've missed the mark or whatever, what did you learn from this experience? If you've learned something, you won. And so this is what we want to know. So next time you're up to bat, you'll perform better, or whatever the case may be. So now we've talked a lot about technical companies. And we've talked a lot about where you're dealing directly with perhaps the owner or the CEO. But I know you work with people outside of the C-suite as well. So are you sometimes brought in by people who are not in the C-suite, but they're the ones that are feeling the pain that you're looking for, and they decide to follow up with you? I would hope they're in the position to engage your services. But if nothing else, maybe they're in the position to somehow pave the way for you to have a conversation with those who can actually do it. So tell us a little bit about how the people who aren't necessarily that signing on the dotted line person could actually use what you've shared on this call to fix the organization as they are experiencing it.
Yeah, and you're spot on, T. VP of operations, VP of sales. Those are the two primary functional leaders that will bring us into the bigger organizations, and they're feeling the pain.
Oh yeah, they are.
And so we help. So we talked about this earlier. If they take some time to back of the napkin math, identify what is this truly costing the business, that's going to help them influence their, the CEO or their manager to consider doing something or to have the conversation.
Especially when it's paired with the recognition that this isn't a technical problem. So we don't want a technical consultant. We want someone to help us with behaviors, help us with communication, help us with how people are thinking about their job and thinking about their responsibilities, because that combination is where they can go, we've got a significant thing we want to act on, and it's a behavioral issue. It's not a technical issue.
Excellent.
I would add one more recommendation. So if I were talking to a VP of Ops, I would ask her, what pain is your manager experiencing?
Absolutely.
And how does that connect with this?
Yeah.
Because the more that you're able to connect those two, because the CEO is paying attention to his tension.
That's right.
What does he care about? And because there is a connection, it's just articulating it or illustrating it is how they'll be more effective.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Really good.
All right, well, we're coming up to the end of our interview time, but I'm kind of curious, are there some points you want to make or some messages you want to share that we haven't talked about up to now that you really want to get across to the listeners? Anything you'd like to share there?
I would say that what we continue to see every single day, high performing business leaders eventually create a ceiling for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And for very good reasons. They don't know how they're doing it, or they're unaware that they're doing it.
Right. They defaulted into the situation. Yep.
Yep. Except they're experiencing a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And high performers usually have an endurance for that intensity of tension or
working hard at it. Yeah.
And so I would say, pay attention to where you're frustrated and annoyed. You're not feeling those things for no good reason, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Excellent. Excellent.
Nailed it.
Okay, so tell us how people can reach out and find you. I'll put it up on the screen at the end, but how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Easiest way is through our website, which is wingspanperformance.com. And when you get on there, there's several options to contact us. My phone number and the way to set up an initial consult with me is all over the place. So lots of easy ways for you to get right in touch with us.
Wonderful. Well, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what you guys do and why it's so important that business leaders are aware of the services that you offer. So perhaps we'll call this part one and carry on our convetion again.
That sounds good.
For sure, part one. And there's so much within ChangeWorks and the Institution for Productive Tension that has helped me for years create more clarity around our system. And so a lot of our success too is owed to you, T.
Yeah. Well, we regularly use the assessment tool, and that is absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's absolutely perfect. How wonderful. Good. All right. Well, what I'll do then is just thank everyone for joining us on today's call, and please keep an eye out for the part two of this discussion. So thanks so much, Cathy. Thanks, Ivan. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you, T.
Thanks, T.
Bye-bye.